All right. Hello, everybody. Glad to see you all here. My name is Alex, and my channel name is Bowman53. And we're going to get started on a conversation about vintage. The name of this chat is Vintage is King. And I think the video said Vintage is King question mark, but I'm going to say Vintage is King exclamation point. To me, there's no debate there, but maybe there is. But we're going to be pretty one-sided on in this chat and talk about vintage as being the end-all be-all. Before we get started, I think it's a good idea for us to kind of introduce ourselves. So what I love all of you guys to do is let us know who you are and what your YouTube channel is. And by the way, all of these wonderful people have their YouTube channels listed in the description below. So please, if you don't know these folks, go ahead and find their YouTube channel in the description and subscribe. You won't be disappointed. So introduce yourself and your channel and give everybody a brief idea of what your collecting focus is when it comes to vintage. So Nina, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Nina S. with a very froggy voice today, so pardon my voice. My YouTube channel is Nina S. Used to be a little more complicated, but I figured this would be simpler. And I also have an Instagram account. I believe it's still the Chronicles of Nina S. I have, like we were talking a little bit earlier, I'm a little bit slacking in getting my videos out, so I would appreciate you all being patient and waiting for the next one, which I have an exciting series coming out. My focus primarily started, at least, with the Cleveland Naps, Indians, now Guardians. Also, the Cincinnati Reds. I was a big fan of the Big Red Machine growing up. And then it's just kind of, moved along to a focus on players who I discovered their history. So I grew up around Willie Mays, and I'm a little bit young for Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby, but
you love Larry Doby.
But I love Larry Doby, and so it's just the whole exploration, which we'll get into later, of all the different kinds of vintage cards. So that is my focus, and cool. I'm going to toss it over to Reese.
Okay. Reese, my channel is Reese ND Card Ranger. Not the easiest to remember, but it's too late to change it now, I guess. But I've been on YouTube for about 2 years. I do make videos, and like Nina, I am spotty for various reasons, life events included. But love YouTube, love the community, and I love making videos. Just a way to express our love for the hobby. But my hobby focus in vintage, I'm a Phillies fan, so Whiz Kids team, yeah, Whiz Kids, love the Whiz Kids. Anything Whiz Kids, that's where I started my vintage exploration. Ashburn, my favorite player, and Doby, Larry Doby. Kind of out of left field, but I do have a reason why I collect Larry Doby. A couple of reasons, and really, my overall focus now, what I really enjoy, in addition to those, is really broad. I mean, I guess it's similar to Nina. I love the history of baseball, so I love to collect the great players. They don't have to be Hall of Famers, just great players in the game with a great story or a strange story or contributed to the history of baseball. So that's really where I love collecting. That's my favorite part of the hobby right now. That's it. Pass it to Alan, right?
Thanks, Reese. Yeah, Alan's Cards. I've been on YouTube since about October 2020, so maybe a little bit more recent joiner than a lot of people. I started out actually when my daughter wanted to make a YouTube channel, and so we compromised on something that I was hopeful we would both enjoy. About 6 episodes in, she bailed, and so I tried to keep up the channel by myself without my technical expertise and editor. So I'm down to about a video a month in a good month. My focus on collecting is mostly pre-war, but also a lot of the key players that could also be post-war and key cards. So always looking at Ted Williams, Jimmy Fox, Hank Greenberg, but also collecting players like Willie Mays, if I can get a Satchel Paige. I really like to focus on more of the mainstream cards. I know a lot of people might be looking at rare or unique issues, but I think back to all the books and magazines we might have had as kids, and those cards that we always saw that we could never have. Those are the cards that still pique my interest.
Right. Excellent. Great. And as I said, my name is Alex. My channel is Bowman53. My collecting focus started out just being that set, the 1953 Bowman color set. But in the past 2 or 3 years, I guess, I've really been focusing on pre-war and just post-war. But I seem to be mostly in the 1950s, although I really like everything vintage. It's just a matter of picking and choosing what I want to focus on as time goes by. So I'm kind of all over the place, but pretty firmly in the vintage camp. So, all right. So before we get any further, since we got some folks in here, I did want to mention that there are some really great giveaways going on right now during Hobby Palooza. I'm sure some of you guys have heard about this, but I wanted to mention it. So anybody can enter the raffle drawing by using the super chat function, which you can see over there on the right of your screen. The entries work like this. So $5 is 1 entry, 20 is 5 entries, $50 is 15 entries, and $100 is 40 entries. And this is to enter a raffle. The entries go into one pot, and the drawings will be held on Monday during the Bench Clear episode of On the Fly. So this is for Panini Football, WWE, Soccer, Diamond Kings, and a bunch of stuff. And it should also be known that the money from the Super Chat is going to a few places, but most notably, it's going to Signatures for Soldiers. So this is a worthy cause. Your money's going towards something that I think we can all agree is going to be of super use. So please consider using the Super Chat function and making a donation and putting your name into the giveaway. Okay, so let's get into some stuff here. So you guys kind of mentioned, we all have a good idea now, I think, of your collecting focus. What I'd love to hear from you guys is to think back on when you actually started collecting vintage. So this is not really YouTube related. This is just, when did you actually start getting into collecting vintage cards? And what I'm really interested in is, what was your thought process back then? However far back that was. What was your overall focus, and what's changed for you since then, and what's remained the same? Alan, how about we start with you?
Yeah, sounds good. So, going back to being a kid growing up, I remember going to flea markets quite a bit in the South Florida area, and all the dealers at the time would have binders full of vintage cards. Mostly just cards that I could look at, but I do remember reading all the history of the game, learning about the stats, and picking out my first 1961 Roger Maris, which to me was like a holy grail back then, and still really is one of those cards for me, regardless of what the record books say. So I started out that way, just kind of building up really small numbers of vintage cards. Condition didn't matter. They were out in the sun in plastic sheets in Florida heat for probably years before I found them. And since then, I definitely still have some of the same collecting tastes. But along the way, I started to build up a very large collection of raw vintage cards, mostly 50s through the 70s. And as I've evolved, I started to kind of thin out my collection, purge some of those, replace them in some cases, keep some in some cases, but really start to get more, quality, or kind of narrow down the focus into just those key players I was looking for over quantity. So it was hard to let some of those go, but I was really pleased to be able to add some of the things that I got in its place.
Right. Nina or Reese, anybody want to jump in?
Sure. I think I've mentioned this story before, but it bears repeating because it's still out there on YouTube. Maiko obviously has this Hobby Talk podcast, and I was cleaning the garage one day. I still remember this, I can picture this, and I was listening to his conversation with Dustin Bellinger about collecting vintage. And at that point, I was, all modern. I'm old enough to know the vintage players, but I hadn't really focused on that. And Dustin kind of just threw out a challenge. He's like, just get one card and see what you discover about that card. And then I was talking a little bit online with Rick of Vintage Dodgeball Cards, and I was kind of like, how do you start? And he said, maybe pick some players from Ohio that are or were born in Ohio. Pick something that will connect to you personally. So and then he also said, there's Larry Doby. I'm like, yes, there's Larry Doby. So I kind of started pursuing those two paths, and those are still paths that I'm on. What has changed is, every year I just find out about more and different types of cards.
Yeah.
From everybody. Like this past year, I think on one of Alex's live streams, Maxa Jackson was on, and he was talking about T206, and like my eyes just kind of started getting dizzy with love of T206, and I've acquired a few since then. And Max made some good recommendations. So I think it's just stay true to your path, but don't be afraid to widen that path.
Right.
Yeah, and for me, I collected as a kid. Like 87 was when I really hit hard, and through the early 90s into high school. And back then, vintage to me was I had a 1974 Hank Aaron special that I thought was like, as a kid, when I first got it, I thought it was worth maybe hundreds of dollars. I had no idea, to be honest.
Right.
But I remember that one, and like my uncle had given me some cards of players from 73, but I only had a handful, and I never really focused on it. I knew about vintage players. I grew up in a baseball family, really. So like I knew the Mays and the Mantles and like the big names, but that was just kind of as far as it went. My grandfather loved Satchel Paige, Murderer's Row, and like Whitey Ford. So I had heard these names, but I had never collected. When I was younger, it was always more of the players I was watching and moving forward. But when I got back into collecting, going through my old collection, looking at those cards, and I thought, man, I want to collect some of the vintage, some vintage. I had no plans of collecting, like permanently collecting vintage. I really didn't.
Right.
Like, that wasn't my goal. I just wanted to have some of the Whiz Kids. That was my first plan. I want the 1950 Bowman Phillies cards. And then I said, well, I want to do Ashburn because he's my favorite player. So those were my only focus, really, when I stepped into it. So and my process was really just to obtain the cards, like Alan was saying, that I didn't really care. Like I got them raw because that's what I was used to collecting. And then I started to learn more, and I picked up some of the graded cards for Ashburn as I started doing that run. And at the time, for one reason or another, reading and I started to watch YouTube then, I wanted them graded. I wanted collector grade Ashburn cards.
Right.
That was my approach then. So it was pretty focused. But then moving forward, like what has stayed the same is what has changed. At the Philly show, I oddly enough, I was there. I met two YouTubers there by chance. Scotty Aranya and Triple B were there, and there was a vintage box there of slabs, and there was a 53 Bowman Larry Doby. And I was like, and it was like $20. It was this little vintage thing. And I brought it home, and I'm like, this is the coolest card. And that started my Larry Doby fascination because Satchel Paige was already on my mind. And when I looked up Larry Doby to learn more about him, I knew the basics, but I didn't realize he and Satchel Paige were on the same team when they won the first World Series with the Cardinals. So I was like, Larry Doby's in. So now I had a Larry Doby. And at the time, I didn't know what I'm looking back, I didn't know what I really liked. So
right.
Like I hadn't seen enough cards, to be honest. I hadn't seen enough variations of all the different sets that were possible to collect. So fast forwarding, what has changed and what my focus is now I know what I like. I know I like cool images. It doesn't matter what the player is, and it doesn't matter if it's the rarest card or a newer card. I want the one that appeals to my eye, right?
Sure.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I also learned that I'm not a set or a run collector, really. That has changed. I don't think I'll do another player run like Ashburn. I'm going to do Ashburn. I do Doby, but that's probably it. There's so many amazing vintage sets and cards out there that I'm in the mode now where I, like Nina, like I love the story. and a figure in history that I love. And then my process now is find out the cards they have and then kind of get the top 2 or 3 that I really love with their image
Yeah.
and watch for them and wait. That's kind of what I do now. And of course, I'm a little biased to Phillies. I pick up, more Phillies and cheaper, but in general, that's my plan. That's what I focus on. I really enjoy that part of it more and more. Yeah.
That's so great. Your answer is pretty much what I would say, so we'll just copy and paste it.
They're all this, yeah.
Yeah. I love what you said about like responding to the beauty of the card or just a card that stands out to you. That's pretty much what I've been doing since the beginning. But when I started, it was okay, I'm going to build this set, and for me that was a way to make my learning experience really kind of foolproof, because it's like, all right, I'm only looking at these cards. I'm only looking at building the 53 set. It made it far less overwhelming because there's just so much stuff out there. Right.
Yeah.
But once I finished that set, not only was it a great experience, but I learned about grading and condition and what do I want and what are the prices and what's the market and all that kind of stuff, which of course I didn't know anything about before. Mm-hmm. So by the time I got to this part of my collecting life, I guess, where I'm kind of picking and choosing what I want to get as opposed to building a set, your approach is very similar. And I think Alan and Nina too, like we're all kind of really being selective about which cards we respond to. When I was a kid, vintage just meant old. And now I think to me, vintage means beauty. Like some of these cards, like no offense to modern, but like some of these cards are they're like little pieces of artwork, in terms, and they were like mass manufactured. But at the same time, like there's a lot of authenticity and genuine, like handmade. There's a handmade nature to a lot of this stuff, like going all the way back into pre-war and like the 1950s in particular. Like it's a hard decade to get out of because like every single year there's a beautiful set made by either Topps or Bowman. And I love that. Like you can get lost in there in a good way. And so I guess if anything has changed, it's just really trying to make sure that whatever I'm going for is something that I'm going to be happy with long term. Something that like I can look at from like 5 or 10 years from now and be like, yeah, I'm really glad I have that card because it kind of stands the test of time.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd add to that too is I've done this kind of both ways of sets, player runs, or kind of what we're talking about now, which is maybe less of that focus and more just selecting the cards of the players or the issues that you want. I feel like both are great, but I would say there's almost as much of a relief or a feeling of satisfaction knowing that you don't need to complete the set or the player run, and you can focus as there is in completing a set or player run. Yeah. So, it's almost like kicking a habit, so to speak. And you can now, you can find another vice. I stopped smoking, so now I can gamble.
Or buy cards.
Oh shoot!
It's true.
All right, so here's the next question. It goes without saying that over the past couple of years, things have been crazy. They've been crazy in the world, and they've been crazy in our hobby. I think all of us would agree to some level that it's been difficult to enjoy the hobby the way that we did, say maybe 3 years ago, where prices were fairly reasonable and you could get the card that you wanted and not have to second guess it. Whereas now you might look up a card and say, maybe this isn't a good financial choice to make right now. So my question for all of you is what sorts of approaches have you taken over the past, let's say 2 years to stay active in the hobby? I mean, one thing we mentioned was I don't think all four of us are not maybe making videos as often as we once were. And sometimes that's because we're too busy, but I think it's also because we may not be picking up stuff as much as we were before. But I know we all love the hobby and we all are in it for the love. So what sorts of things have you kind of come up with to kind of stay active in the hobby?
I can go first if that makes sense. First thing I'd say is, no matter what prices do, up or down, it doesn't change the amount of time I spend looking.
Right.
So I'm active out there, Facebook, eBay,
That's a good
whatever
point.
it is. I can waste a day shopping without buying. And one of the things I've been doing on top of that is, really kind of taking a look at my collection, seeing what I want to make sure I retain or keep. But there are some cards that I've had in my collection for a while. I was fortunate enough to get them before the boom, where the eye appeal just isn't what I was wanting, but I know I wanted those cards in my collection. So, a couple of examples come to mind where I had a 41 DiMaggio and the 49 Page. I sold them both towards the end of last year, knowing that I wanted to replace them eventually. Kind of took advantage of the timing a little bit, and just recently was able to replace both. So I actually got lower technical grades, but what I think are higher eye appeal, and really no cash outlay. So I didn't have to worry about, how high these, values are now, whether or not they're going to stick around or not. I'm really in the same position I was before, but hopefully with cards that I'm now, more comfortable, looking at, keeping, and hopefully having forever. So that's one thing that I've been doing.
Right.
I think for me, it's cutting back. I had to really cut back on modern. I mean, I was just spending money crazily on modern. And what really helped was the shortage due to COVID. Couldn't find anything. So then I had to be creative about what is it I really want in modern. I buy a box of cards and I want one player out of there. So that really curtailed. And as that curtailed, I'm trying to learn to be patient like Alex and not jump on the card as soon as I see it. Now I'm a little concerned that, the card's going to go up $100 in a week if I don't jump on it. But I think, Alex has also taught me just be patient. Like I've sent him a couple cards sometimes. I'm like, what do you think? He's like, well, I think it could be better. So just be patient. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and I should say when I'm giving you that advice, like I'm not thinking about like, oh, Nina's probably been looking at that card for 4 months and she finally found one. I'm just like dismissing it.
No. Probably I just found it a couple days ago. But that's, being patient has led me to some great cards, and a shout out to Card Soup, Brian Roth.
Yeah.
Brian, if you don't follow Brian, you should follow Brian, especially his Instagram account where he shares. He has an amazing eye for vintage cards. So working with Brian and getting deals that way versus just going out on eBay, I think that's probably how I've tried to balance this higher market price.
Right.
Don't you? Yeah, I have been collecting through this whole time. I can't help myself, but I kind of went in a couple of different directions. I love vintage Western, which is not popular, so that was an easy out for me to pick up some more of the vintage Western stuff that I wanted and spend a little more time looking for that. And I went to like the non-sports show in Philly, and it was a lot of fun. So I kind of was able to distract and spend a little more time on that than I would have typically. But there are a lot of, for me, vintage cards that that are obtainable if you look, or depending on what you want to collect. So like for I think it was $50 shipped, but I started looking for older cards of players that people might not be interested in. And like I think it was the March Philly show. I picked up the Fred Snodgrass T206 in the lower grade.
Cool.
It was $60, like for $60, right? And I was so happy to get that card. Great guy, great story from the glory of their times that Nina passed on to me, that book. But and I picked up like a Bing Miller, who no one really cares about. It was a 22 Nielsen's Chocolate, which I always wanted. One from that set. But he won 2 championships with the Athletics, but really it's a lower recognized player from the Phillies history, Wall of Fame on the Phillies, but still get it at a good price. And so I kind of I just went in a little bit different direction to scratch the itch, but find cards I really liked for maybe not as popular players that people are looking for. There's just so many out there, and that was my approach. The other kind of out of the box thing I did, I love to send care packages, and we all do. So I usually do a few, and then when they're all done, I send them out. So I'm working on 3 now that I want to send out over the next couple of weeks. But it's a lot of fun. Slowly just pick up cards here and there that, you have someone, once you pick up one card for them, then they're kind of on my list, and then I start browsing and like noticing different cards I can include.
Right.
It's just a fun thing to do. Still scratch the itch, but send the cards on to somebody else. So
that's a great great idea, and I love that you're doing that. Yeah, for me, again, similar in the fact that, I mean, I think I've mentioned this before in other chats that we've done, but I've got this running kind of PowerPoint that I've been building for years, and it's just every card that's kind of like my wish list card. And cards come off and on to that list all the time. I'm always looking at it, and it's filled with, big cards, iconic cards, but it's also got a bunch of stuff that everybody would be sort of like, really, you want that card? Like, it's, it's a common card. It's like you were saying, it's something that isn't like demanding a high price. And that's perfect for, what we went through. So, I'm just as happy to, get a Walter Johnson as I am, a Jack Barry or whoever. So because I'm responding to the beauty of the card, or like you said, like a Fred Snodgrass, maybe there's an interesting story behind the player, and to me that builds my collection. It's not just iconic players, it's baseball, and baseball is a very big story that's hundreds of years old now, and I like building that story little by little. And so those common, less desirable cards to me are just as important. I mean, don't get me wrong, having a Hank Aaron rookie card is definitely an exciting thing to get in the mail. But
absolutely.
But I also really enjoy getting those, like, maybe less than desirable cards as well, because to me they're exciting, they're fun.
Everybody loves a mail day.
I know we want to keep going, but I want to just point out, and this doesn't count as my card to share, Reese.
Oh, come on.
But you can buy Larry W cards that look like this.
Yes.
So that I bought it so that I could touch it and hold it. So like some little boy or girl did in the 50s. And so, that cost me $20.
Yeah.
So,
and to add on to that, I got the Nilsson's chocolate raw, and it does not smell like chocolate anymore. It is the grandmother's cardboard, attic. There is no hint of chocolate, and you can touch it, you can feel it, you can smell it.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Reese, just get a Hershey's bar and stick it on there for a while.
That's right. Rub it on the back.
Recreate the experience. Okay, well, so I'm glad you showed that card, because it's now finally time to show some stuff. So I got a lot of flack for this one, especially from Reese. The rule is, I guess it's a rule, show us one vintage card that you want to geek out about. So this is the stipulations, just so everybody knows, because I don't know what they picked. I'm excited to see what they picked. It's either got to be a new acquisition, but it could also be something that you've had for a while. It could be a big card, it could be a common card. The thing is, what is it about the card that you're drawn to? Maybe it's the history, something about the player, or maybe it's the story behind how you got the card. Whatever it is about the card that makes it special for you. So, Reese, I have to start with you, just because I can tell you're like,
no,
it's been painful.
I hope I don't disappoint you, Alex. I passed over a few cards in my collection that were like cards you'd have to beat me over the head with, and to get away from me. But
right,
I wanted to show one that is a recent pickup that I kind of geeked out over, and I've been looking for a while, and finally picked up, and it actually just came this past week. But so this
is an exclusive, right? No one's seen this card.
No, right, yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Great.
Exclusive, debut. So it's actually a pre-war card, but it's vintage, right? But I've been looking at, I don't know if you can see that. Is it glaring? Is that okay?
Oh, no, you're good.
That's
you're good
better.
Right there. Yeah.
So it's a 1910. Oh, there you go. E91C Tris speaker. It's American caramel. So I've had Tris speaker on my list, like you, Alex, for a while, and there's like 3 cards of his that I like. This one was kind of, to me, the harder to find, and it popped up, and I jumped on it. But Tris Speaker, he obviously is one of the great center fielders of the game, right? And
Right.
there is a, I don't know if you can see the glare. It looks okay? I'm sorry. It's like crazy.
Yeah, if you point it to the right,
Let me do that.
yeah.
There.
Oh, it's going off my screen. Okay, that's the thing. So
There you go.
yeah, and first of all, he's a Hall of Famer, and the story behind that is enough. And he was on my list, but also the American Caramel. So American Caramel is actually a Pennsylvania-based, and it's from York, which is like an hour and 40 minutes from me.
Right.
And it just has a good hit. So I have E21 Joe Wood that I've showed in the past, and I'm trying to just get some examples from the American Caramel. That's just another connection I have with it, which makes it fun. But
it's so great. Yeah, I have this strange sense of pride whenever I see that on the backs, like York, PA, or Lancaster, PA. It's like, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
And the cool part about American Caramel too is, I mean, basically I forget who owned it, but they purchased Lancaster Caramel, which was owned by Hershey, Milton Hershey, but he kept the chocolate part of it and started the chocolate business. So I mean, it's just a cool Pennsylvania history. But Tris Speaker and like his his amazing career and what he's known for, like what is it, the doubles, career leader in doubles of all time. But he played such a short center field, and John Mangini talked about this all the time, that players talk about him when they hit the ball just turning his back and running. He was fast enough to do that, but he could get a force out at second base. Yeah, it was crazy. So this was the card I finally picked. Because I was geeking out over it. Now, the only thing about this set, this isn't the most popular set because the images are quote unquote generic. They say,
Right.
But I don't care. I love the colors. I love the illustration. It's a 1910 Speaker. It's like, come on, right?
Right. I mean, even the story behind the cards being how they were made. I mean, that's interesting too.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. Good choice.
So,
Good choice.
Okay. All right. That's it. I have one more. No.
Nina or Alan?
Go ahead, Alan. I've been talking too much.
Sure, I'll go. So my top 10, starting with number 10. No, I'll narrow it down to one. I did follow the rules. So mine is 1941 play ball Ted Williams. So I think the set has grown on me, consistently. I think, one, I prefer color to black and white. It's just my preference. I prefer single player to multiplayer. Just a few things that I like to focus on. Ted Williams, is probably the top player in my collection in terms of number of cards and focus. And I chose 41. It's his first color card. I love the color of it.
Yeah.
The season, of course, the 406 season, the season he should have won the MVP and lost out in the popularity contest to DiMaggio. So I'll go ahead and show my hopefully no glare. I bought this one a little while ago.
That's awesome.
I picked it for the centering and the color and for the grade. I know low to mid grade for the year. I don't focus necessarily on the technical grade, but no creases, no major issues. And so every time I look at my collection and think, what could I do in terms of narrowing it down? What if I'm just displaying 5 or 10 cards? This is always one that I would always hold on to and have as my number one, Ted Williams. And he's got so many great cards. I won't show them to follow the rules, but obviously he's got the 39 play balls, the rookie. It's just black and white in a distant image. He's got the 48 leaf, which is just a great image in color. In every 54 card, with the Wilson Franks, the Bowman, and both tops, issues, the number 1 and number 250. But out of all of that, this one is still my top for the player.
That's awesome.
I just wrote down 1941 play ball Ted Williams. I mean, I've seen the card before, but sometimes, when you come across it in the right moment, it kind of stands out to you. Yeah, that's a beautiful looking card.
And that's it. It's got some that are just kind of portrait type images like this, or the Reese, Pee Wee Reese. But then you've also got so many great action type photos, like the DiMaggio, Bobby Dorr, just a lot of players with amazing colors.
Right. Yeah. Okay, Nina, you're up.
All right, you peer pressured me. I'll narrow it down to one.
No, show two. Yeah, go for it. Let's play two.
I'm trying to I'm working on a series. Maybe when I turn 70, I'll have it done on famous first baseman, and I won't say why yet. I don't want to give away my storyline, but so I was asking a lot of people. In fact, one night Alex had a live stream, and I was just asking people famous first baseman, and some cards were affordable and some were not. So then I also asked good old Terry from TJ Maxx Vintage, and he recommended a Ferris Fame card, which let's see if I can keep it not glared. It's a 50 Bowman.
Yeah.
And what I like about the card, and I'm not going to be able to give you a good angle on it because of the glare from the outside, but it's that 50 Bowman background. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, he's playing first base, but it's the most odd positioning on first base.
Yeah, he's like playing catch with somebody in foul ground.
Maybe that, or maybe he really played third, and they're like just joking with me. But Terry, if you're watching this, I got one. He was telling me about it. I actually got it wrong, graded it, so I was very happy that it was authentic.
That's great. That's a beautiful card.
Continuing with that theme, my card collection, I wanted to be showing them playing first base. So Alex helped me find the Gil Hodges 53 Bowman. Awesome. I mean, is that beautiful or what? I mean,
amazing.
53 Bowman. If Alex had made the great collection, that would be something I'd like to pursue one day. But
hey, you can. Cool. Don't let me stop you. Like you'll enjoy.
I don't know. I don't think I can afford it these days, but
well, you know that. I mean, that's a good. I mean, I would not build that set the way I did now. I would do it raw for sure, and have just as much fun doing it. It's a beautiful, beautiful set. All right, so the card I picked was the last card I got, which was quite a while ago now. It's the 29 Shonen Club Babe Ruth.
Oh yeah, I love this card.
And I picked this card one because I just got it, so I'm still kind of like staring at it a lot. But I also got it wanted to show it because this card it's been on my list for a while. And it's one of those things where, you got to find the right opportunity to pull the trigger. And what I'll always remember about this card is that I got it from Brian. We talked about Brian earlier, B. Roth, and his company Card Soup. And Brian happened to post this. I can't remember if it was on the Card Soup Instagram or where it was. And I immediately texted him and said, "What's the story with that card? I hope I'm first in line." And we chatted, and long story short, I was able to get it. So not only do I love the card and the history behind it, I mean, technically, okay, this is a postcard, so I guess I broke my own rules. But I love the history behind this. I love like the story behind how this was made and how it was distributed. But I also love that I can look at this and like think about YouTube. I can think about Brian, my buddy in collecting cards, and it's just got this nice history going for it now. So
yeah,
I feel like whenever you have an opportunity to do that in your collecting, it elevates the value, not necessarily financially, but definitely in terms of just the appreciation of what we do, which is collecting vintage.
I connect strongly to your point about getting cards that were recommended by other folks in the YouTube community, because every time you look at that card, you're like, oh, Terry, Alex, and I even was a recipient of a donated card from Alan, and so every time I see these cards, I think of you all. So, Ruth, come on, buddy, get some cards. I need the 48 Dobie if you don't mind.
Yeah, me too.
Right. All right. Let's see. Next one, some more show and tell. I got a comment on my channel recently where the person said that they wished that more of us YouTubers were showing non-card related items from their collections. And I thought, you know what, that's a good idea. All of us, we may not be like predominantly focused on baseball memorabilia. Most of us are focused on cards, but I took a shot and guessed that each of you have some non-card related baseball memorabilia. So in that spirit, show us some memorabilia from your collection that you enjoy. And Reese, we'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah, this one ironically goes back to what you just said, Alex. I was watching Jesse's channel, Think Blue 77, and
Yes.
he has amazing, diverse collection of everything.
He's got a
It's-
museum. Yeah.
man, and he collects mitts and gloves.
Right.
So I chatted or messaged, I left a comment of, "Hey, man, I'm going to see if I can get a vintage Richie Ashburn glove." And he sent me all kinds of information because he has catalogs and
I'm sure he did. Yeah.
yeah. So I think of Jesse and thank you so much, Jesse, for leading me down this path. And then I got a early 50s Richie Ashburn model. It's a McGregor Goldsmith glove.
Oh, it's
Very
beautiful.
cool. And it's got his signature on there.
Yeah, it's I don't know if you can see here,
Oh,
but
yeah,
Richie
perfect.
Ashburn.
Oh, yeah.
That's
his
great.
model. It's a
Beautiful.
G116. That was his model of glove they sold, and it says McGregor Goldsmith. So, and this is definitely probably a 50 or 51, probably 51 because it was McGregor Goldsmith, and then they dropped the Goldsmith because McGregor had a bigger name.
Right.
So then they just went with McGregor. So it kind of dates it, and I have one of their catalogs. There's a site like this is the catalog. This is a printout of the 1950 McGregor catalog.
Man,
Wow.
that's
this is
a
the-
work of art. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the glove, the G116.
Cool.
So like, and there's this it's baseballglovecollector.com where they have these PDFs of these old catalogs. So I started looking at them, and thanks to Jesse, I got this really cool early 50s Ashburn glove that I'm redoing my office. This used to be my wife's as well, but now it's just mine, so I get to.
We won't ask about how that happened, but
So I'm redoing this, and I'll be putting up some of this stuff, and so
Cool.
I'm anxious. Yeah,
that's
it.
great.
Yeah.
Cool. Alan, how about you?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of non-card related stuff. It's actually a personal strategy to put more into the cards. But what I picked out to share was actually kind of handed down from family friends, and it's I believe a Type 1 photo of the 1928 World Champion Yankees.
Wow.
I'll drop it up on the
Wow.
screen. So you can see kind of
Oh,
Ruth in the
wow.
back in the middle, and Gehrig kind of down here looking kind of grim. Miller Huggins in the middle in kind of the black coat. And in the back, you can kind of see a little bit, if it comes through without the glare, of the provenance, the Brown stamp. Brown was a big kind of photo archivist back then. And then the lineup, handwritten down by what I believe was kind of part of the press, or the press corps writing down all the names before it got printed out into the newspaper.
Fantastic.
That's cool.
So slew of Hall of Famers, and I guess for those who maybe don't know or remember, the 28 Yankees swept cards in 4. Just kind of towards the end of their dominance before the A's started to come into play. So yeah, I've had this kind of in a frame for a while. Just didn't want the glare, so I took it out.
Yeah. No, great. Thank you so much for sharing. That's incredible.
When I was starting my Larry Doby collection, I just kind of typed in Larry Doby to see what would pop up. And I got this little magazine. It's called
beautiful.
Quick. And it's tiny. Here's my hand.
Yeah.
It's like a little Reader's Digest version. And the headline is Larry Doby better than Jackie Robinson. I was like, well, I need to read that. And so when you go inside, it has some great vintage pictures of Doby himself. But to me, this is a primary source. I really want to read about Larry Doby through the eyes of the reporters who observed him playing.
Right.
It's, going back and reading old newspapers from Cleveland. That's just, to me, it drops me right into that time period. Even the language that they use is so hilarious. So, and the conclusion, if you want to know, was that Larry was not quite as good as Jackie yet. So,
Okay. All right.
That's so great. I love the design of that thing. And you're so right, Nina, like the opportunity to sort of see what the perspective was at the time. And, obviously we have so much, retrospect knowledge, but to see what people were thinking at the time is incredible. Just wanted to remind everybody to continue to consider participating in the raffle. Remember, the super chat will allow you to put in an entry. And just also a reminder that the super chat donations are going towards the signatures for soldiers. So please consider participating. All right. So we got about 5 minutes here. What I would love to do is we'll have to wrap this up here. I have a sort of a doom and gloom question. Mike, if you're there, if you can kind of push us back out to all of us, thanks. I wanted to ask this to you guys because it's something that I kind of think about every now and then. It can feel sometimes like the younger generation, and this is kind of a generalization because I know there are exceptions to this, but it's like, you know, I think we all kind of worry, like, is the younger generation still going to be into baseball? Do they care about the history? Do they really want to know about the great teams or the players from the past that we've been talking about today? You know, who's going to care about Ty Cobb or Willie Mays in 50 years, that kind of thing. How do you guys see it? Because I do think like the COVID sort of period definitely had this resurgence in the hobby, and it definitely had an impact on vintage. But I do think that most of that resurgence was about the financial benefit, not necessarily about, you know, what we've been talking about here, which is like the hobby, the history, the players, that sort of thing. Will the next generation kind of pick up where we are, or is it mostly going to be about the investment side of things moving forward? What do you guys think?
I can go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'm optimistic, more optimistic. You know, I think about it going backwards, like who collects modern or who collects vintage now, and it's, you know, you either love baseball and you grew up playing baseball, or someone took you to games as a kid, and so you love the nostalgia of it that way. You love history, which is right. I always loved history. So, you know, I think that type of person is still going to collect vintage. It's just how many kids are being exposed to it, baseball in general, right? And taken to games and the history of the game to find the passion, to find that they do love the history of the game. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm optimistic. You know, I still feel like there's going to be the passion in the core of collectors in the future. And, you know, one thing I suggest is, you know, trying to expose as many kids to cards and collecting as we can in the history. I did it with one of my cousins. I gave him cards represent like my family members and their favorite cards, like my grandparents. And I gave him 7 cards: Whitey Ford, Mickey McDermott, Mike Schmidt, and like a few cards like that. And I put down whose favorite cards and players they were, or players, right, not cards. So he had a card to represent the favorite player of his grandparents, and you know, his great grandparents, and me. I gave him an Ashburn, right? So stuff like that. It's the only thing I can do, right, to try to help, right? But right. I don't know. It's my simple answer, but I'm optimistic. I really am. Yeah.
I mean, I can't really add much to what you said there, Reese. I would totally agree with you. I think that people love history and people love baseball.
Yeah.
And, you know, I didn't really come to vintage until my later years here. So I think that there will always be that love of history and baseball out there. But I like your idea, Reese, about sharing it with our own personal family. So I think that's important to do.
I think maybe I'm maybe mixed, both optimist and pessimist on this one. I'm optimistic that hopefully this generation still collects for a long time. You know, hopefully I've got 40 years left to collect. So if we think about values and, you know, worrying about what you're buying, you know, hopefully that has a long way to go, because it's a hobby that you can do, you know, for your entire life. On the other side, I am a little bit, you know, concerned about, you know, the next generation beyond that, because I think, you know, less popular players will fade and continue to fade over time in interest and understanding and you know, people's knowledge of them. So, you know, just a quick example, I was reading something in a Facebook group chat the other day about Grover Cleveland Alexander, you know, who arguably is, you know, one of the best pitchers of all time. But you don't really hear much about him in terms of collecting. He doesn't have a ton of issues or cards, but he's not mentioned with the greats. And even Stan Musial, where you can pick up, you know, any random 50s or 60s Stan Musial card for a reasonable price, doesn't have the popularity of Mantle or Clemente.
Right.
So if I was investing for the future, I would be more optimistic with those people that retain their popularity. Whereas, I obviously just participate for the hobby. Because I do think that over time, just like we've seen players fade, like Alexander or Addy Joss, or a ton of names, or Musial compared to Mantle, or DiMaggio even compared to Mantle. So that does make me nervous. 60, 70 years from now, it just won't be the same as it is today.
Right.
Gotcha.
Chicago lady, I hope you're making YouTube videos, and if you're not, please start. And that goes for anybody else that's out there that's not making YouTube videos. Please start. We'd love to see your inclusion. So, okay, we're unfortunately out of time. So I want to thank Nina, Reese, and Alan for your time and for sharing your cards and your thoughts. Thanks everybody else for the great comments in the chat. And I want to make sure that everybody's hopping over to the next stream, which is going to be Andy. She blinded me with refractors. Head on over there for a mystery stream. We don't know what it's going to be about, but no doubt it's going to involve sports cards in some way. So check out Andy. He's a great guy and has a great collection. Thanks, everybody, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of Hobby Palooza. Take care.